Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A. So let's go ahead and get this started. All right, first question. Hey Jason, I'm pretty sure you said that good mornings are a more recovery-friendly hip hinge movement than, say, a Romanian deadlift. If true, why is this the case? Why are good mornings easier to recover from? I've covered this quite a few times, actually in detail, but we'll cover it just briefly again. Less total axial loading. Now, I'm going to have a video coming out later. It might be a couple weeks after this. It might be 3 or 4 weeks. I've already made it, though, where I go into a lot of detail describing the squat versus a good morning regarding this. Romanian deadlift is pretty straightforward. It's less weight at the top. And I do mean that. Now, you'll get people who say, Jason, but you're talking about getting your good morning as heavy as your squat. Jason, you do 365 for sets of 10 on the good morning. Yeah, you guys think that's anywhere near what I could Romanian deadlift if I were to throw straps on? What? That's a warm-up. Like, I don't even know if that's a warm-up on a Romanian deadlift. I don't know, 500 for 10. A lot of guys can Romanian deadlift more than they conventional deadlift off the floor. I've had a client who did it and he couldn't understand why his 8 rep max on an RDL was the same as his 1 rep max on a conventional deadlift when he tested it the first time. Okay? Put that in perspective. Put that in perspective. So when you hear someone like me talking about my goal is to get to a 600 good morning, put that in context. You think I'd be happy with a 600 deadlift? How high is my deadlift going to be at that point? Big grip limitation. So we come over to the points, less axial loading. It's very straightforward. And in terms of the weight on all the musculature involved, once you take the grip out of the equation, a lot of you guys are not going to want to do grip training with an RDL. Okay, you're going to end up using a mixed grip, and a lot of you guys are worried about imbalances and all this other stuff. Okay, so you're probably going to strap up. Look at the angles involved. You're creating a longer moment arm with the good morning versus the RDL. Now, that gives you a little better upper back training, right? Potentially, a little more thoracic erector, with the same amount of work being placed on the rest of the posterior chain. Okay, less weight will equal the same work. It's easier to recover from. It's a more versatile tool, and I'm not saying the RDL is not a good lift. I'm not saying I don't ever have any of my lifters do RDLs, because, you know, people hear me say this and then they assume that I hate the exercise. And a couple of my clients would be like, Coach has had me RDL. Promise you, I got 3 clients who would say that right now, possibly in the comments. I've had them RDL. We don't ever remove good mornings. Good mornings are in there. We don't ever not good morning. Treat it with a great degree of importance. It's just less axial loading. It's easier to recover from. We can do more total volume on it. It's a more versatile training tool. Not saying the RDL is useless and doesn't have its place. It's going to be used less often. All right, next question. What are your thoughts on the concept of using hip drive during a squat instead of a more traditional push through the heels? Sorry if you've already answered this. If you're squatting correctly, you don't have a choice. What do you mean? Hip drive is automatically going to be part of squatting. If you're squatting correctly, squatting with any sort of remotely wide stance, you're going to have hip drive. And that's going to require you to push your feet out. You can't drive through the heels if you're pushing your feet out. I think what you're calling the traditional is not a power squat. It's the Olympic squat. Okay? And we don't need to differentiate other things. People might try to call them whatever. No, let's call them what they are. We have the power squat and we have the Olympic squat. The Olympic squat is used to carry over to weightlifting because of sport specificity, and the power squat is used to squat the heaviest weight possible. Okay. often used obviously by power lifters who compete in that lift. Right, that's the difference. The power squat is going to have hip drive, and you're going to have to push your feet outwards to do it correctly, so you're not going to drive through the heels. In fact, even the same thing, you don't need elevated heels for it either. I think that one will come up also. So what do you mean, what are my thoughts? You're going to use hip drive, and we're going to get hip activation. We're going to use a lot of hip. And on a power squat like that, we use just as much quad. The scientific literature says that we use just as much quad. All right? So scientific literature shows it. The biomechanics show it. The EMGs show it. We have multiple different techniques trying to read it. You get just as much quad activation on a power squat. We use more hip. It's more glute. It's also easier to reach parallel. Ooh. Relative to knee angle. Okay. So, what do you mean? That is the correct way to power squat. It's also the correct way to squat if your goal is to gain as much muscle as possible. Of course, I prefer to do it on a box, unless we're testing a back squat. But that is what you should be doing. If your goal is to lift as much weight as possible and gain as much muscle as possible through your entire lower body, that's the correct way to squat. If your goal is to get carryover to the full clean, which is a sport-specific need, and that is a real need. A lot of people want to clean who don't, not just weightlifters, a lot of people want to clean for other sports. I get it, not knocking it. It would behoove you to do some Olympic squatting. Don't say that's all you have to do. You can definitely power squat too. Probably should. It would be more balanced. But that's the difference. All right, next question and last question of the week. Hi, Jason. Do I need the good morning if I train the reverse hyper with enough volume? Aren't they similar movement patterns? You say we need all of these and more for posterior chain, but I don't think you said which one is better. We can't quantify which one is better. In a perfect world, you will do both. Now, question becomes, what makes you think we do good mornings only for the posterior chain? You don't think we build our upper back with it? Well, let me ask you a very, very simple question. Can the reverse hyper build your upper back? The answer is obviously no. The answer is obviously no. Okay. Can you get the restoration effect from a good morning that you get on a reverse hyper in the lumbar? No. Therefore, how can we say which one is better? They both bring something to the table that is extremely, and I mean extremely valuable, that the other one cannot replicate. All right? Put that in perspective. Now, I make all of my lifters good morning. All of them. Why? Because most of them don't have a reverse hyper. My guys who have a reverse hyper do good mornings. And you know what? I tried to play that little game at first, and I regressed real quick, didn't I? And then had to re-throw it back in. Well, I got the reverse hyper now. I don't have to do good mornings. So it went real well, didn't it? I had to throw those back in, and now I focus hard on both. These are two of my staple exercises that I train religiously. They are two of the most important movements that I do every single week, and I train them both in two different modalities because they bring unique things to the table. Now, can this build your posterior chain? Absolutely. Is it still everything that you need? In a perfect world, no. I believe you need glute ham device. Well, you don't need it. There are things that can largely replace it. Okay. It's a real good idea to have that in there also. That's my trifecta. That's what I'm doing. Playing a big role in my ability to squat and deadlift what I do. To particularly my deadlift. All right. No, if you have access to a reverse hyper, you need to do good mornings. If you don't have access to a reverse hyper, you're only going to be able to do good mornings. In a perfect world, all of my lifters would have access to all three. And I do have clients who have all three. I only have 2 clients who have all three, but I do have them. One of them is a very advanced lifter, who you guys have actually seen in a video recently. One of them is not. But they both use them. Okay. Any of my lifters who have access to a glute ham device at their gym, they use it. But everybody, good mornings. All of my people who are paying me $250 a month to coach them, they all do good mornings. All of them, without exception. All of them who have a reverse hyper do the reverse hyper. One of them bought it at my recommendation. Another one's about to buy one. Alright guys, well that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.